Meeting in order, if you will. I appreciate the committee to come and be a part of this evening. I realize that hours late, but our scheduled meetings are on Thursdays, and you're doing a little overtime with the Senate meeting as well. And I've asked Assistant Commissioner Brian Owens to prepare for at least some sort of educational portion of Department of Corrections on a weekly basis. So whether we have legislation or not, you'll have an opportunity to at least get to know more and more about the department. I think really that's probably the only way you can effectively do your jobs as an oversight committee also, is to understand the committee, to understand the department's process. We'll also probably be listening to similar seminars from Properties Commission as the times go on, and Brian has agreed to come back and get into more details of what we're going to do with the Prison Enhancement Program. And with that being said, Brian, you may take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me introduce to you this morning Mr. John Howard. He's going to provide a presentation. I think the presentation is going to last about 10 or 15 minutes. So as he's discussing, please feel free to interrupt during the presentation if you have a question. You don't need to hold it to the end. But before I introduce him to you, Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to invite your committee, as we talked about, if there's a particular item of interest that they would like to read that they're not aware of, we can have to provide a briefing for them too as we go through this process. Let me introduce and turn over to you Mr. John Howard. Mr. John Howard comes from the federal prison system. He's a Georgia boy, grew up in Thomaston, Georgia. Started to work for the federal system in Atlanta in 1975 as a correctional officer. So he worked
What was the name again? Your name? John Howard. Okay, great, John. Go ahead and tell us what's going on and what you're expecting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If I could stop you on, I don't think I got a pass out or either. Does anybody have a hand? Or did you send a handout?
Kind of in a brown folder.
Okay, they're in a brown folder. Okay, well, I don't have a brown folder. I guess that makes a difference. One brown folder. And I wanted let me just mention to the committee that, that this is a very informal committee meeting, and I'll probably call you out your first names. I don't have the cameras on, so you guys can just relax and ask any of the questions, even if you think they're silly. You can ask them because you're not going to be recorded on this one. That might make. Well, if that be the case, I'll tell you what we'll do. We do have a quorum. We'll vote on that and determine whether we should turn the cameras on. Generally, we would, but since we're not going to take action, and most likely in the future meetings we will have the cameras on, but I didn't do that at this time. Actually, when we first came in there, we had so few members, I thought that it might embarrass some if we actually turned the cameras on. So, but we did grow up. But, I guess I got the chart in front of me. And do you have the board rules in there also? What you passed by the board? Oh, you happen to have those with you? Boy, let's turn the cameras on. Go ahead then and pick up from that at that point and tell us where you're at and what you're anticipating.
We can get those delivered.
Good.
Is his mic on this table?
I just turned it on. It is.
Okay.
May have to get a little closer to it. Let's stop and talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind. Where's the department at in trying to determine the pie chart as to how much deductions are going to be kept by the state or how much is going to actually be kept by the inmate?
At this time, we haven't finalized it, but what we're looking at here is, as far as the all applicable the taxes, those are all local, state, those will be a general given. Victim compensation fund, in particular victim restitution, those areas will be a minimum of 5% up to a maximum of 20%. That's static.
Mm-hmm.
In the room and board, I've seen just a number of different ones from the facilities we've been to, and they range from 25% to 50%.
Let me ask you. I've saw those. I think every committee member has seen those models as well. But how close are we getting to try and making a proposal as to what we're going to do as far as our percentages?
I think we could do it any day now.
Okay.
Just using those parameters.
Okay. Just a second.
Yes, sir. The chairman asked one of the questions I had, and thank you, but on the previous page, have you started any meetings yet with any of your partners?
Yes, sir.
You have. Who have you been meeting with?
I met with the carpet industry.
Okay.
They're interested in putting together a sound
Just one further question,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman. I'm hoping, I'm a supporter of the program, very much so. I see a lot of good in it. I think, I've got an old saying that understanding prevents misunderstanding. I would suggest that you carry labor along in these meetings. You just keep them informed, because I think it'll be a lot easier on the back end, because many of the questions we had raised were raised by labor and their concerns in displacing of workers. And I think that periodically, if you met with them, we'll find it to be a lot smoother transition and everybody's on the same sheet of music. Just a suggestion.
Part of the program itself mandates that you get with labor on each one of these particular counties.
I know it does, and what I'm suggesting, Mr. Howard, and I think you're moving along good, and I'm glad to see someone with your background involved in it. But what I'm saying is it would be so much easier to be meeting with them now than to say, the program's ready and here's what we've got. And we've invited. Okay.
Representative Dean, I think, has a question as well.
Give me an idea of what amount of money the inmate might have after we went down this list and talked about the different kind of deductibles.
As I said earlier, the victim compensation, in particular victim restitution, those are ranged from a 5% minimum.
Right.
Basically, you've got to take that up to 20 as a max. Then you look at the room and board, and that's something we'll just need to establish at that point. The child support gets into a situation of what is the child
Right.
support, and then that goes.
Right.
The maximum you can take is 80% on a deduction.
So 20% of that.
So 20%
And then-
cannot be deducted.
And then you got a that's even taken under consideration mandatory
That
savings.
figures mandatory savings, but the mandatory savings, as we're trying to develop this, will become an issue because if you get into the victim compensation or the
Right.
court-ordered
Right.
situation and the child support, the mandatory savings may not be available
Right.
because of that. But in most cases, I believe it will because our sentences usually do not have restitution. The child support may be an issue. But those are things, that's the.
But under
part
no
about the program
circum-
paying for that particular.
Yeah. Under no circumstance can you go over 80%.
No, sir.
And when I was coming in, you said that this program is voluntary.
Yes, sir.
Do it defeats our purpose by making it voluntary?
No, sir, it's, I think it would defeat the purpose of the program itself if it wasn't voluntary. Because then you're going on the program of slave labor or forced labor. And I don't think that's.
Slaves don't get paid.
I'm just thinking that's part of the program, though, forcing people into a labor program itself. I think there'll be plenty of people that are very anxious to get into this program. I don't see that as
Okay.
a problem with that.
Okay.
Okay, I think we have another question, Representative Buckner.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Help me. You said 80%. That's for all of these deductions, from the applicable taxes all the way down to the mandatory savings. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
The 80% of what?
Can't exceed 80%.
For and within the 80%, it can be divided however you want to. So what's the that other 20 go for?
The 20% is that it would go into the inmate's account itself. You can't take any you can't.
So the mandatory savings is in his account? I'm confused.
It will hit his account. I think what we're gonna be looking at by the time we sort everything out here, the deduction is gonna be about 60%, the remainder will be going into the account unless we run into a child support issue.
You know, I think that probably what would be helpful, obviously you haven't got it entirely ironed out. The committee is very interested in how you're going to break those dollars down. What I would suggest the department do is, why don't you give us a few scenarios? Why don't you go back and look at this, and you come up with a few scenarios as to what the department thinks would be a good benefit for our Department of Corrections, so that the committee can sort of mull over those and see what we think, and maybe we can get our heads together on that as well, if you don't mind.
Just to add to that, under this mandatory savings, if you have any, would it go into some kind of account where they get interest on their money and stuff like that? We haven't thought about that yet.
Go in the inmate's account. We have no interest in
So who gonna hold the inmate's money, and how do the inmate? That money is just gonna be sitting in an account?
Just for clarification, obviously the dollars which go into the inmate savings account, I would assume that's an interest-bearing account, wouldn't it?
That's what I'm talking about.
I'm not sure on that point, Mr. Chairman. I'll bring an answer back to you. I don't know
Okay.
if it's interest-bearing or not today. It's all right today.
Yeah.
Sir, the statute, the federal law does allow us to go up to 80%. As you recall, last year, we don't really envision going up to 80%. All of it we like the best is what we saw in South Carolina, where after all deductions are over, the inmate keeps about 52% on the dollar. We want to make this to where the inmate can actually benefit from the program. Now, our anticipation is that we will be somewhere around 50%, perhaps 60%.
Right.
We will offset room and board, but we don't want it to be a self-defeating purpose either, because the inmates we're targeting are long-term inmates. We've got all kinds of.
Oh, I see what you-
They're getting ready to get out.
Right.
We're having programs for 6,000 life sentence inmates, so it's 7,500 that are sentenced to 10 years or more. Those are the ones that sit idly by in the institution.
Uh-huh.
So we want the inmates actually competing for these positions. We want them applying for these positions. They've got to have impeccable behavior in the prison system, because there are not going to be nearly as many jobs as our inmates wanting them. They have to have impeccable credentials in their institutional conduct. We will require that they're either in a GED program or a completed GED program. We will require that they work through Georgia Correctional Industries.
Okay. Okay.
They're going to get up every day, they're going to
Right.
do a job and do a good job, and then they're going to actually have to apply and interview with the business that's in the institution among their fellow inmates that compete for those jobs. So we want to make it just like everybody else does, competing for those jobs based upon your behavior and your work skills.
And you looking at just the long term
Yes, sir.
inmates. But I mean, I guess the question I would say is, for instance, somebody who got 10 years. 10 years, if he kept 52% of what he made, had on a job for 10 years, under God, we need to be looking at how he can put that money in some kind of saving and get some kind of interest on. Because one of the real problems on our residual rate and everything is people going into prison, coming out with nothing to live off of, and getting right back into trouble. Yeah.
I appreciate probably what you might want to take a look at on that, the savings portion is you may develop some sort of a fund for that portion that actually creates shares where there's X number of dollars in interest that's going to be paid on X number of shares. I don't know. There's a lot to be worked out on that, but I think it's probably unjustified. If it belongs to the inmate, it's their savings account, they probably ought to be able to earn an interest on that. We also have a question from Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I grab the
think we
microphone
delved
there?
a little into this last week when we discussed the commissaries and the possible advent of the PI program in which inmates would have more money to spend. So I would be anxious to learn about what parameters the inmate might be able to spend that other 20%. I think those persons employed in this program would need a little more incentive that would allow them to spend a little more money than what they're currently spending on potato chips and personal items. And I'm interested in the savings too. I think that ought to be some way a savings for them, not just where they can put their money and draw out what they had in there in that tenant.
In addressing that, we have a limitation on what is, on how much an inmate can spend anyway in the commissary. And I think
Yes.
that would be restricted to that particular point, but
We're
I don't
aware of that.
believe
We're
we
aware of
raise
that,
it
but-
beyond that level.
But would it change the pie since they have more money?
Good question.
I'm going to look into that. Yeah, I think Representative Green has a question as well.
Yeah, I know this. All of this is in the making here. What will be the responsibility of the company coming in helping? There certainly will be an increase in the amount of paperwork of keeping up with the accounts and everything. will it fall on the Department of Corrections, or will it fall within the purview of the company?
It's according to the program we get into, and I'm answering that in case we have models that are set up for this. An employer model would actually do all the taxes, and they take all the deductions at that point, except for the ones we're talking about as far as once it gets into the child support and those particular areas. So we would actually get a check in, and they've already taken those.
They wouldn't take out for that?
They wouldn't take out for that because that would be what a normal company would be required to do. We would do that as a separate issue once it comes in their facilities.
You would take.
We would take that. They would take out the taxes and Social Security and those particular items as far as, and then pay workers' compensation under that model.
Would you charge the company an administrative fee, though, and as part of your fees to recoup some of the added costs to the Department of Corrections?
I haven't put anything together for charging them an administrative fee at this point.
Maybe something you want to look at as far as because you may get into a situation where it would be kind of time-consuming and costly to the state, though.
We had meetings this week addressing that particular requirement and what burden it would put on the individual institutions themselves. At this point, it doesn't look like it would raise the number of staff needed. It would be a requirement that's different from that standpoint.
Okay, I think we have another question from Representative Williams.
I heard you with the amount of people with the long-term sentences. Of course, this is designed for, and I'm a little concerned, and I know that we have some federal guidelines we have to work with, because I know that there's great interest in certainly for the victims. There's great interest for the bed, but both of those are not the primary reasons for high recidivism. $25 in a bus ticket is where the problem lies. So I'm certainly glad to hear you using the 52% because it makes good politics to pay the victim and to pay for the bed, but it does not reduce recidivism. What he's got in his pocket to pay rent, get a piece of a car, and do some things with is what determines if he stays out or not. Now, we'll make great hay paying victims, and we should. I want to see us do it. But it will not keep people out of prison. $25 is what sends them back. They're broke before they get on the bus because somebody's there hustling candy at the bus store.
Looks like that's all the questions on the funding issue, which you obviously there's a lot of interest there. And I apologize that we've sort of stopped your presentation at that point, but that's something that we wanted to hear from you on if you'll continue.
We've already addressed the next one where we're talking about potential partners. We're talking about repackaging, we're talking about marketing history and electronic items. Those have already been covered. Long-term goals to provide real-life work opportunities. Work ethic is a learned behavior. That's one of the things that I think the problem other than $25 on a ticket home is a problem. But one of the things is many of our inmates have not worked. They haven't got up on 8 hours a day. And that is a learned behavior that they wake up. And the other part about it is the idleness in our prisons. I think everyone, and I've dealt with prisoners for many years working in these, they're proud of the work they do. They're proud of the
I think we have some questions also in this area. Representative Green.
Recently, I returned from China, and I saw a lot of the workers that were doing American products there. $39 a week. Are the people that are coming to you looking at the type of labor there as sort of the offshore labor pool?
I've had one that came with that in mind. He thought prevailing wage was 42 cents an hour in China, maybe. But I told him that the statute is that it's minimum of $5.15, and that also must be established as prevailing wage by the Department of Labor, saying this is what they would be paid for a month. And that's the statute we would have to.
What kind of interest do you have in the program right now from the private sector? Are you getting a lot of calls on this, or is there much interest there at this point? Or does the state even know we've got this going on?
Getting a number of calls, very intense with a couple of people right now as far as trying to get a program going. That's what we're doing right now. Is while we're waiting for the certification process, I'm trying to develop the Cost County Center program itself to make sure that all the necessary requirements are met by this company. And we're trying to work out the program. We're getting a lot of interest.
Representative Reese.
You know, I never understood the rationale for making this statement, that the PIE program might help keep more jobs here in the United States, because we're very determined to treat these inmates fairly, those that do volunteer for the PIE program, and not only the minimum wage, but the prevailing wage in that area. And I do hope you work closely with Department of Labor to ensure that they are treated fairly, and also to make sure they're not displacing other workers. But I'm losing some of my industries to other countries too, and knowing that the reason they're going is because of that 25 cents a day to 47 cents a day. And this statement always bothered me.
John, how are you aligning prison enhancement program with the department? Is it going to fall under correctional industries, or are you setting aside some subgroup, or where's it actually going to fit?
What we're doing is doing sort of a team concept here. What I've done now is I'm in Department of One, but I have a number of departments working with me, such as the budget office, where we'll work that way. I'm putting together our own structure. I'll be working with the facilities on how to develop that.
So you're standalone. You're not actually. Who are you answering to?
The
You're
director of OPT.
okay.
We have three committees for benefit. We have three divisions within the department.
Yes, please explain.
We have the corrections divisions, which oversees the probation and prison operations, the real work of the department. We have what we call the administration division, which handles our budget, our accounting, our fleet, some of those other activities. Then we have what's called the operations planning and training division, whose primary mission is support the field in their operations. So the PI coordinator position falls under that support position of supporting what the field does.
Who is the terminology director or supervisor of OTD?
Arnold Smith.
Arnold Smith.
Planning and training.
Okay. Continue, please.
But as far as the way we set this up, the first thing I wanted to do was set up a budget process itself, as far as if I be taking money, where does it go? How do we handle it? We've done that particular. We've worked with our information systems to take care of that particular problem. As far as when we start into the program and we start, correctional industry is not having any administration or oversight of it. We are looking at their excess capacity. If they have capacity manufacturers to produce beyond the equipment they've got and the orders they've got, I can look at that for a potential design program and also work an agreement with them on paying them a burden labor rate.
Is
Use their equipment and use it.
Is there any thought that correctional industries in a sense, will hire inmates to do certain work? I think some states have looked at that. I don't know. I'm a little rusty with it, but is there any thought along that line?
I think the direction that I was headed.
I guess it's to make and manufacture products is what most have done, and then sold the products, and then some return to come back.
The direction I was headed with it is that more that if I have 10 people working in this particular section that does something, if I need 3 to do prison industry enhancement program work, they will be assigned to do that and will be paid accordingly. I mean, you do run into some problems with it, but that's something other states are doing, where they just designate that these 3 will be working on that particular project. That includes even the warehouseman that handles it. So the burden labor is always applied to. In that particular case, the company that you're working with would not be supervising. We would be supervising and charging the burden labor for the finished product.
Okay. Representative Green.
Mr. Chairman, that brings up another question. If, of course, we're going to have to provide security and all this during this time, are we going to do like we do to our counties and cities that they actually pay a fee for the guard to come and to work within the facility there?
I'm going to set up an arrangement where if the security of that particular institution is at the level that I would require, whatever level I require as far as increased security, that I would charge that in the process of what we were, when we're setting up the contract, that would be covered as part of it.
See no other questions on that subject. You want to continue on?
I think in closing here, that this program is an outstanding program. It provides support for inmates to pay taxes, pay victims, provide support for the families, pay room and board, helps offset their incarceration. I think it's a win-win for everyone. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Sure. You're stating that you think that we'll have our waiver in March, or
We should have our certification approved, I hope, in March.
In March. what kind of goals do you have as far as participation in the number of inmates that will be employed under PI, say, over the next 5 years? Have you got to that point yet?
No, sir. I'm more in the stages right now where I'm trying to find, first of all, space that's available to set up a PI program.
That's interesting. How are you doing that?
I've got one building set up right now, working with Correctional Industries, trying to determine their excess capacity, talking to a number of wardens about space they may have in their facilities that isn't utilized. But that's how we're going to handle it.
Yeah. What the hurdles with labor and paying and prevailing wage, with the type of request you've got at this point, what are you seeing there? What kind of obstacles are you running into as far as Georgia is concerned? Yeah, and making sure that we're not going to displace, obviously, the free world.
At this point, the Department of Labor is still working on how they're going to approach it. I sent them a number of options that other states are using as far as determining prevailing wage and that wage rate.
Got some more questions, I think, on that area. Representative Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Howard, you stated a while ago you were trying to build a budget. Do you have a budget that's going to be in 07 there?
And on that line, are you anticipating state dollars? You don't think the program will pay for itself?
I think the program will pay for itself. That's my intent.
So the budget, you're actually preparing a budget that'll actually be within itself, and you're not actually planning on asking the state for any dollars. Good. Representative Williams.
That's part of what I wanted to ask too, but I can't overemphasize the importance, and maybe when you come back with the report the chairman has requested, that you'll be able to talk to us more in depth with your plans for the partnership and your meetings with labor and assurances that there will not be a displacement and how we're going to establish the prevailing wage of an area, just to clarify some areas I think we're all anxiously waiting to hear about.
In your negotiations with businesses, I assume that you're holding most of that close, or at what point will all this become record so everyone to know who you're talking to?
As we're going ahead and put the cost accounting centers together.
Okay.
That's when we would be doing it. What we're doing now is I'm requesting from the companies I'm dealing with, put position descriptions together and have identifiable programs that DOL can look at, say, yeah, this fits that particular market, so they can start their study process.
Yeah. I've heard some talk on, obviously, as you know, the Senate as well as the House have been looking at the commissaries. There have been some talk about maybe the possibility of having a PI program for inmates who actually would run the commissaries. Could that work? Or have you even looked at that?
The only way that would work was if the commissaries ran the programs themselves, ran the commissaries themselves.
Explain
They
that.
could not do it as they do today. If we're running the commissaries, there's no way that the supplier at this point could pay for the people working in there because they don't work for him.
You're talking about the state employees. Are you?
I'm talking about state employees are running our commissaries
Right.
today. The only way that particular situation would work is if private could be privatized.
Right, but you'd still have to have a private supervisor over the inmates in that commissary anyway.
We would have to have that to come about before.
So it doesn't sound like it probably would be a fit. Any other questions? We really appreciate you taking the time to brief us. Let me do this. There's a number of people out here. Obviously, some interest in the audience. Do you guys have got questions? Go ahead. Identify yourself, if you will.
Hi, I'm Sarah Takachi. I'm with the Southern Center for Human Rights, and I also work with a group called Parents for Prisoners Candidates, people who are related to people who are locked up in the state. And one of the things they're really concerned about is whether or not some of the money that an inmate will make, they might be able to send it home. They might be able to supplement some of the very high costs that family members are carrying, paying for phone calls, providing money for the inmate accounts, that sort of thing. I know we mentioned child support, but in the case that maybe there isn't child support, would they be able to send money home?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that's one of the purposes of this whole program, be able to assist the family. And I think that's one of the major things.
Other questions from me? Go ahead. Identify yourself, please.
Yeah, Tasso Knight, and I represent labor in Georgia, and obviously we've got the state labor, and then of course I represent organized labor in Georgia. In the beginning, last year, when we first started talking about this, Richard Gray, the president of the Georgia AFL-CIO, a group that represented, I guess, the prisons and so on, sat down with Richard Gray and said, we want to make sure that y'all are at the table with us as we go through this process. And then we've never heard from them since, even to this day, finding out. When are we going to get on board? I mean, I don't know what planning or anything else is going on or getting up to the point that we're at now. And unfortunately, I just got in here a minute ago, so I don't know what's really been talked about. But, we would like to be in and talk with and, be a part of and work with, so forth and so on. So that's where we stand right now. So I don't know when the start point is.
Go ahead, please. Address that.
Thank you for that comment, sir. We will invite you to participate, should you want to participate, of course, share with the Southern Center. I think there's some other organizations too, where we talked last year. Up to this point, it's been primarily boilerplate legislation.
Sure.
We've had to do with the federal system. There really are no decision points at this point until we get that certificate from the federal system.
Understood.
We certainly will invite any organized group at that point, once we get the boilerplate, we've got the legislation passed, we've got the application to the feds. Once the feds get it back, I think at that point, the real decision will be made. We'll certainly let you
Task, what I might mention, just sort of to help you along the way where we're at. The truth be known, this is the first opportunity this committee has even had a chance to find out where we're at and what has occurred. So you're actually on the cutting edge. You're right here with the legislature. You're getting the same information that NES. And I think what we're going to require is more and more information to be coming forth, right? And that's the purpose of this, because we're about to be there. And we want all to get there at the same time. I think Representative Williams has a question.
I heard what Tasso made reference to, and before you came in, I think I kind of raised that. Well, I did raise it directly, but I think that it just kind of bears out what I said. And the promises, well, the statements were made by Commissioner Donald, and one of the things is, even with you, like I said, we're glad to see you aboard. But it would have been nice to drop them a memo and let them know that you're on board and what your job is. They certainly, but the chairman certainly stated it properly, as this is the first time we've gotten to know. So believe me, you're on the cutting edge. I've learned today.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Is there others from the audience that would like to make a comment or ask a question? Any more members of the committee? Okay, good presentation. Do you have an idea what you're going to brief us on next week? Have you got to that point yet?
Yes, sir. We'd like to bring our food and farm supervisor in.
That'd be great.
Food operations, our farming operations, the cost to prepare meals. And
If you'll do that, and if you'll be prepared to do something a little bit different, this, even though the committee doesn't make budgetary amendments, it'd be interesting to understand the food and service budget. If you could sort of prepare to do that, give us the whole ins and outs in food and service. And I do that for a point. I'm hearing rumors of such as privatization for food and service, and I'd like to see the justification for that if that occurs. I'm just hearing rumors out in the street, not from the department. Just there's a lot of people I think would love to sort of get the contract if they could, and I'd like to see where we're at on that. Yeah, and I appreciate that, and we'll have a number of others. What I'd like for you also at some point in time is to start preparing correctional industries to come in, because the committee needs to know the ins and outs of it as to how that works. And that's another interesting area for budgetary, since it's a trust and not necessarily the funds doesn't necessarily go back into the general fund. So we'd like to see how that operation works as well, if you start looking into that. Is there a request from the committee, things which you'd like the department to prepare for over the next few weeks to bring presentation? Is there anything that is burning in your mind at this point in time you've wondered about but you just haven't heard? Well, I'm sure there will be, and actually one has mentioned of certain prisons. They want to try to compare some of the local prisons of the same type of security, one for the other, to see what type of systems are actually out there. Let me mention this in closing. And I'm sure you probably remember that we've been invited out to dinner tonight. And if you didn't know that, by the way, the audience, you're not included in this. This is this is not a communion, I'm afraid. This is for a private dinner. I think that CCA, I believe it is, has invited the committee out to dinner tonight, and you should make preparations. Do that if you wish. And also, I want to mention this as well, that if you need a committee day for tomorrow, since we will be working in this dinner tonight, feel free to contact Ginger and ask for that as well. Okay? Meeting adjourned.